Throughout human history, executioners have played a key role in upholding the power and authority of rulers, governments, and religious institutions. These men and women, tasked with carrying out death sentences, became figures feared by the public. Executioners were often seen as necessary evils, reliable, methodical, and at times disturbingly cruel. While some executioners simply carried out the death penalty without question, others became infamous for the brutal, sadistic methods they used to execute their victims. Their methods, many of which were designed to maximize suffering, have left an indelible mark on history. In medieval and early modern Europe, the executioner's job was both a profession and a symbol of power. Kings, emperors, and religious authorities often relied on these individuals to carry out their grim duties. However, executioners were not universally loved or respected. In fact, they were often regarded with fear and disgust by the public. Their job involved the grisly task of putting an end to someone's life, and this role made them both feared and loathed. But despite their infamy, many of these executioners became notorious for the inhumane methods they employed. One of the most infamous executioners in history was Jack Ketch, an English executioner from the 17th century. Jack Ketch became notorious for his botched executions and is often seen as the quintessential example of a poor executioner. Ketch's most infamous moment came in 1660 when he was tasked with executing King Charles I's regicide. The execution was meant to be a clean beheading, but Ketch's slow and ineffective swing of the axe led to a botched execution that took several blows to finally sever the king's head. This chaotic public execution cemented Ketch's place in history as one of the most inept and ineffective executioners ever to live. The failure to execute swiftly was seen as a disaster, leading to widespread public disdain for Ketch's incompetence. While Ketch's failures are known for their inefficiency, there were executioners throughout history who took pride in their gruesome craft. Franz Schmidt, a German executioner from the 16th century, became notorious for his efficiency in carrying out death sentences, but he was also known for his cruelty. Schmidt claimed to have executed over 350 people during his career, but it was his sadistic nature that earned him infamy. Schmidt's executions were known to be quick and merciful. He took pride in making sure his victims suffered the least amount of pain. But his methods, though efficient, were still violent and filled with brutality. Schmidt was rumored to enjoy the act of taking lives and viewed his job as one of power. His calm demeanor and unwavering focus on his work made him a terrifying figure for those who knew him. Not all executioners, however, were as methodical. Some executioners took sadistic pleasure in their work. One of the most infamous executioners in history, Hassan I-Sabbah, a medieval executioner during the Islamic Golden Age, was known for his horrifying methods of execution. Hassan used devices like the breaking wheel, which was designed to shatter the bones of victims, causing slow, excruciating pain. He would often force victims to endure prolonged suffering before ultimately putting them to death. Hassan's enjoyment of inflicting pain and his sadistic nature made him a figure of terror in the Islamic world. Unlike others, Hassan's approach to execution was about torturing his victims, turning their deaths into public spectacles meant to instill fear in the populace. Executioners also played a role in religious persecution during the medieval and Renaissance periods. The Spanish Inquisition, for example, used executioners to carry out brutal sentences on those accused of heresy, witchcraft, or dissent against the Catholic Church. The Iron Maiden, a device used during the Inquisition, was one of the most horrific torture devices used by executioners. It was designed to impale victims with sharp iron spikes, slowly killing them over a period of time. The device, which enclosed the victim in a coffin-like structure, would slowly pierce the body with the spikes, causing excruciating pain and often leading to death by shock or blood loss. The Iron Maiden became one of the most iconic symbols of medieval torture and execution. Another brutal method employed during the Inquisition was the rack, a device used to stretch the body of the accused until their joints and limbs were dislocated or torn apart. Victims would be strapped to the rack, and then the executioner would slowly increase the tension, pulling the limbs in opposite directions. This method of execution was often used to extract confessions, but it was also designed to break the spirit of the victim. The suffering endured on the rack was prolonged and unbearable, and many victims died before they could confess. Perhaps one of the most disturbing executioners in history was Jean-Baptiste Carrier, known as the Butcher of Lyon during the French Revolution. Carrier's methods of execution became infamous for their sheer brutality. During the Reign of Terror, Carrier ordered the mass drowning of men, women, and children in the Loire River. These drownings were done in large groups, with Carrier pushing his victims into the river, often while they were still alive. This mass execution, known as the Nantes, became a symbol of the terror and excesses of the Revolution. Carrier's sadistic methods left a mark on history, showing how extreme ideologies can lead to mass violence and horror. Executioners were often figures who embodied the worst aspects of human cruelty, taking lives in horrific and creative ways. Their methods ranged from quick, efficient executions to prolonged, torturous deaths. In many cases, executioners were not simply tools of justice, they were instruments of terror meant to instill fear and control. They were figures who thrived on power and the ability to take life at will without remorse or hesitation. These individuals have left behind a dark legacy, one that serves as a stark reminder of the horrors that humanity is capable of when fear and control dominate. While executioners were often seen as mere tools of the law, their methods were frequently a dark reflection of the societies that employed them. Their actions were not only meant to end the lives of those condemned, but in many cases, they were designed to instill terror, break the spirits of the accused, and maintain control over the population. Executioners, through their work, often became symbols of fear and oppression, forever etched in history for the brutality they wielded. As we look back on the history of executioners, one of the most terrifying examples comes from the French Revolution, where the guillotine became the execution device of choice. The guillotine was originally conceived by Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine as a more humane method of execution, intended to be quick and relatively painless. However, it soon became synonymous with the Reign of Terror and the mass executions that took place during this chaotic period. One of the most infamous executioners associated with the guillotine was Charles Henry Sanson, the chief executioner of Paris during the Revolution. Sanson, who executed King Louis XVI and many others, became a key figure in the French Revolution's brutal purges. Sanson's role was not just that of an executioner, but as a man who carried out hundreds of death sentences with cold precision, often in public squares. It is said that Sanson maintained a calm and methodical demeanor, which made his work even more chilling. His efficiency and detachment allowed him to carry out executions without hesitation, even when facing the heads of noblemen, politicians, and common citizens alike. Sanson's name became synonymous with the terror of the French Revolution, embodying the stark cruelty of the time. The public nature of the guillotine executions made them even more horrific. Unlike private executions, the use of the guillotine was often done in front of crowds, with victims paraded through the streets before meeting their end. The crowds, often filled with revolutionary fervor, would cheer as the heads of the aristocracy and political enemies fell from their bodies, while others watched in fear, wondering if they too would be next. This public display of power, coupled with the speed and efficiency of the guillotine, made it one of the most feared execution methods of all time. But the guillotine wasn't the only tool used to impose terror. Executioners during this time would often employ long, drawn-out methods of torture before a death sentence was carried out. This was not only done to punish the accused, but to send a message to the public that dissent would not be tolerated. For example, during the Spanish Inquisition, victims who were found guilty of heresy were often subjected to prolonged torture methods before their executions. The goal was not just to execute, but to humiliate, break, and extract confessions through pain and terror. One of the most horrific methods used during the Inquisition was burning at the stake. This method was primarily used for witches, heretics, and religious dissenters. The victim was tied to a stake and then burned alive, either with firewood or by using oil and pitch to ensure the flames would burn hotter and quicker. The process of burning alive was agonizing and brutal. Victims would often endure several minutes or even hours of pain before succumbing to the flames. Burning at the stake was a deeply symbolic execution, meant to purify the body of the impure soul, according to the Church, but it was also a form of public spectacle and control. These executions were meant to serve as a warning to others, and the fear of such a horrifying fate kept many in line with religious orthodoxy. The most notorious torture device of this era was the Iron Maiden, a terrifying contraption that was meant to prolong suffering before death. The victim was placed inside a large metal coffin with spikes lining the interior. The device would slowly close, impaling the victim's body with the spikes, causing pain and often death. Though there is some debate about whether the Iron Maiden was used in the Middle Ages or was simply a later invention based on historical accounts, its association with torture and execution has become a powerful symbol of medieval cruelty. Perhaps one of the most chilling elements of execution throughout history is the psychological terror that it instilled in those subjected to it and the public that witnessed it. Many of these executioners were not simply performing their jobs, they were figures of authority meant to reinforce the power of the state or church. The public nature of executions during times like the French Revolution or medieval Spain served as grim reminders of the consequences of defying the law, whether for political reasons or religious heresy. The purpose of these executions was as much about controlling the populace as it was about punishing the individual. In the modern era, executioners have largely been replaced by more sterile methods of capital punishment, such as lethal injection or firing squads. However, the historical legacy of executioners and their gruesome methods serves as a powerful reminder of the depths of cruelty that can be reached when the state, religion, or authority holds absolute power over life and death. These executioners, whose names have sometimes been lost to history, have nonetheless left behind a legacy of fear and suffering, shaping not only the lives of their victims, but also the societies that gave them power. Today, we reflect on the disturbing methods of execution as a way to remind ourselves of the importance of human rights, the dangers of extremism, and the necessity of justice that respects the dignity of all individuals. The lessons of history, though grim, continue to provide crucial insights into the need for compassion, fairness, and accountability in the face of authority. The stories of the worst executioners in history are not just tales of cruelty, but warnings of the consequences of unchecked power and a call for the protection of human life and dignity.